In a landmark decision that will echo through the halls of American government for years to come, the Supreme Court has struck down President Trump's sweeping tariffs, ruling that he overstepped constitutional bounds by imposing them unilaterally under a national emergency. The justices found that the president's actions bypassed the checks and balances that are fundamental to the U.S. system of government. The court's majority declared that Congress's power to regulate foreign commerce and impose taxes cannot be bypassed, even in times of crisis. This decision reaffirms the essential role of the legislative branch in shaping the nation's economic policy, especially when it comes to international trade. This ruling is a forceful reassertion of the separation of powers, ending an era of tariffs that reshaped global trade and domestic economics. The court's decision sends a clear message that no president, regardless of circumstance, can act alone in matters that so profoundly affect the nation's economy. The decision immediately halts the tariffs, leaving businesses and consumers to adjust to a new economic reality. For many, this means rethinking supply chains, renegotiating contracts, and facing uncertainty as the market recalibrates. Legal scholars compare this to the 1952 steel seizure case, affirming that even the president is bound by the rule of law. The echoes of history remind us that the Constitution's limits are not mere suggestions, but binding principles that protect democracy. The ruling in Learning Resources, Inc. vs. Trump underscores the judiciary's role as the ultimate arbiter of constitutional boundaries. The court's opinion is expected to shape future debates over executive authority and the scope of presidential power. The relationship between the White House and Congress has been fundamentally recalibrated, with lasting consequences for presidential power. As the nation absorbs this historic decision, the balance of power between the branches of government stands reaffirmed, setting a precedent for generations to come. The road to this Supreme Court showdown began with a wave of lawsuits from small businesses, industry groups, and Democratic-led states, all challenging the president's unilateral tariffs. These groups, representing a wide spectrum of economic and political interests, argued that the administration's actions threaten not only their livelihoods, but also the constitutional balance of power. As the tariffs rippled through the economy, frustration mounted among importers, manufacturers, and consumers alike, fueling a growing sense of urgency for judicial intervention. Plaintiffs contended that President Trump had used emergency powers as a pretext to legislate from the Oval Office, bypassing Congress's explicit authority over taxes and trade. They claimed this move set a dangerous precedent, allowing the executive branch to sidestep the checks and balances that are fundamental to American democracy. The legal battle quickly became a test of how far presidential power could stretch in the realm of economic policy. Central to their case was the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, a law originally intended for targeted sanctions against foreign threats, not for imposing sweeping tariff regimes on allies and rivals alike. The plaintiffs argued that using IEPA in this way distorted its original purpose and undermined congressional intent. Lower courts were split on the issue. Some judges deferred to the executive branch, citing the president's broad discretion in matters of national security and foreign affairs. Others, however, were alarmed by the unprecedented scale and scope of the tariffs, warning that unchecked executive power could erode the separation of powers. The resulting legal uncertainty, combined with the enormous economic stakes, made Supreme Court intervention all but inevitable. Business owners, lawmakers, and legal scholars watched anxiously as the case climbed the judicial ladder, knowing the outcome could reshape the limits of presidential authority for years to come. The case was fast-tracked to the Supreme Court, where oral arguments revealed deep skepticism among several justices about the administration's claim to near-unlimited power under IEPA. The justices pressed government lawyers on the potential consequences of such broad authority, signaling the gravity of the constitutional questions at stake. The court's swift action underscored the urgency of resolving what many saw as a brewing constitutional crisis, with implications reaching far beyond the immediate dispute over tariffs. The decision would become the first major test of Trump's second-term agenda before a conservative majority court, setting the stage for a landmark ruling on the boundaries of executive power in American government. At the heart of the dispute were layers of tariffs imposed by President Trump, justified under overlapping emergency declarations. The most controversial, the trafficking tariffs, targeted imports from Canada, China, and Mexico, ostensibly to combat drug trafficking. Critics argued this conflated trade policy with law enforcement, punishing legitimate businesses and straining alliances. Broad reciprocal tariffs hit nearly every U.S. trading partner, creating global trade chaos, and sparking retaliatory measures. American manufacturers and farmers faced soaring costs and lost markets, while some industries saw short-term gains. The legal challenge argued this web of tariffs amounted to a new taxation system by executive fiat, violating the constitutional requirement that revenue bills originate in the House. The administration's approach, challengers said, was a clear usurpation of Congress's taxing power. The Trump administration defended its actions by citing the broad powers granted by the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Government lawyers argued the president alone could determine what constitutes a national emergency, and that courts should not second-guess these judgments. They claimed the tariffs were essential tools of foreign policy and national security, pointing to recent concessions from China as proof of their effectiveness. The administration insisted that Congress had deliberately delegated this authority, and that the courts had no right to intervene. They drew a distinction between foreign commerce and domestic overreach, arguing the president's latitude is greater in international affairs. The case set the stage for a direct constitutional confrontation over the limits of executive power. The Supreme Court's ruling has unleashed immediate economic consequences, starting with the prospect of massive tariff refunds. At least $90 billion in collected tariffs are now subject to claims from businesses, creating an administrative and legal quagmire. The decision blows a huge hole in the federal budget, which relied on projected tariff revenue to offset tax cuts and fund policy initiatives. With this revenue stream gone, Congress faces a sudden and severe budget deficit, igniting fierce political battles over spending and taxes. The abrupt policy reversal creates winners and losers, as businesses scramble to adapt to a post-tariff landscape. Economists warn of market volatility and a potential debt crisis if the fiscal gap isn't addressed. The ruling has forced a fiscal reckoning that Washington can no longer postpone. The fallout will dominate legislative debates for years to come. At its core, this Supreme Court decision is a powerful lesson in the separation of powers. The ruling reaffirms that Congress alone holds the authority to regulate commerce and levy taxes, and that this power cannot be transferred to the president through broad emergency statutes. The court drew a clear line between the president's foreign policy role and Congress's control over the purse. By striking down the tariffs, the justices reinforced that major economic policies must pass through congressional debate and approval. The decision echoes the 1952 Youngstown case, placing Trump's actions at the lowest ebb of presidential power. The precedent will likely curb future presidents' ambitions to use emergency powers as a legislative shortcut. The checks and balances envisioned by the founders remain a vital safeguard for American democracy. The Supreme Court's decision has sent shockwaves through Washington, deepening already sharp political divisions and igniting passionate debate across the Capitol. The ruling has not only altered the legal landscape, but also intensified the sense of uncertainty and urgency among lawmakers, officials, and citizens alike. For President Trump, it's a stunning and personal defeat, invalidating a signature policy that he championed throughout his administration. The decision strikes at the heart of his image as a decisive, unyielding leader, and raises questions about his ability to deliver on key promises. Supporters are left frustrated and searching for answers, while critics see the moment as a turning point. The White House has reacted with fury, denouncing the ruling as judicial overreach. Within Republican ranks, the response is far from unified. Some lawmakers echo Trump's outrage and vow to fight back, while others, wary of unchecked executive power, quietly welcome the decision as a necessary check on presidential authority. The party's internal divisions are now on full display. Democrats, meanwhile, see the decision as a powerful vindication. They celebrate it as a victory for the rule of law, a crucial check on presidential power, and a reaffirmation of constitutional principles. For many, it's a moment of triumph that energizes their base and strengthens their resolve to hold the executive branch accountable. The ruling has forced a fundamental debate about the presidency's role in the 21st century, compelling both parties to clarify and defend their vision for the balance of power. Lawmakers are now grappling with questions about how much authority any president should wield, and what limits are necessary to preserve democracy. The decision may also have a lasting impact on public perception of the Supreme Court itself, highlighting its independence, even from the president who appointed 3 of its current members. The court's willingness to challenge the executive branch is being closely watched by legal scholars, activists, and ordinary Americans. The fallout from this landmark ruling will shape political contests, campaign strategies, and legislative priorities for years to come. candidates and lawmakers on both sides are recalibrating their messages in response to the new political reality. The issue of executive power is now at the forefront of the national conversation, sparking renewed debate about the limits of authority and the responsibilities of those who hold the nation's highest office. As the country absorbs the implications, the path forward remains uncertain, but the stakes have never been clearer. The Supreme Court's decision in Learning Resources, Inker and Trump sets a powerful new precedent, sharply limiting the use of emergency powers for sweeping economic policy. By closing a potential loophole, the court has fundamentally altered the balance of power, ensuring future presidents cannot impose broad tariffs or taxes without Congress. The ruling will be studied for generations, standing alongside other landmark cases that define the separation of powers. Presidents must now work with Congress on major trade policy, leading to a more deliberative, if slower, process. The decision is a clear statement that the presidency's powers are not limitless, they are constrained by the Constitution. By striking down the Trump tariffs, the court has reinforced the principle that the United States is a nation of laws, not of men. The founders' vision of checks and balances endures, shaping the future of American democracy.